And it is Scott Agness from The Athletic. Scott, how you doing, my friend?
Doing well, KB. Kind of in this wormhole that is Las Vegas and NBA Summer League right now, but it's a good time.
What is Summer League life like outside of the gym for you?
So the biggest thing I'll say is outside of the gym, it's kind of you bump into people everywhere you go. It doesn't matter what hotel, what resort, if you're walking through a casino. I mean, it's not shocking, KB, at all to see a 7-footer sitting at a craps table or, working that, or an agent having a conversation with a head coach at a chair, near the elevator. So to me, it's fascinating to see all the various conversations I'm having or observing throughout all of it. But you're also seeing a lot of people that are sleep deprived and trying to get conversations in, as well as trying to watch the next generation of players.
Well, speaking of sleep-derived, I would think you have probably been that, trying to write stories about Goga He obtaining a work visa and things that you thought you'd be writing about in your athletic career, which is still relatively young. I'm not sure where this fell on the list. Couldn't be very high. For those of you for those of us that maybe haven't read your piece on The Athletic yet, I encourage everyone definitely to read it. But what is the latest on Goga and the visa situation?
Yeah, you're right, though. I mean, this is a story that I kept getting questions about. Is he there yet? It was kind of like the kid on a vacation. Is he there yet? And it's like, no, you got to continue to be patient. And so the thing that continued to be stressed to me before I dived into it was the fact that it's not being delayed. It's not getting held up. It's not a problem. It's just the process. So then I dove into what that process was and found out that professional athletes essentially have a specialty visa that they have to apply for. And usually it can be expedited due to relationships in the government with teams. And, of course, Pacers have that and utilize that. But currently where it stands as of this minute that I know of is he's just waiting on that interview, kind of like if you are getting TSA pre-check. You got to go in, 5-10-minute interview, then they sign off and you're done. And that's where it's at. He's back home at the Republic of Georgia. That interview was scheduled either for today or tomorrow, and then he'll get on a plane and get right here to Vegas, and then it's likely he'll try to play. But it's also a time he's been playing professional basketball since he's 14, so he does not need these games as much as some of these players that really need to impress other teams since he's been a pro for so long.
Yeah, selfishly, I just want to watch him. I'm tired of watching YouTube highlights of him. So right now, that interview would take place then, like you said, in the Republic of Georgia at the U.S. Embassy?
Yeah, that's exactly right. And the Pacers work with government officials to try to expedite that, because usually they try to work you in about a 15-day period. And I forget the exact date they told me, but it was in July 17th or 18th where that interview was originally scheduled. And they obviously are working to move that up and maybe complete it even today.
I don't know if you know this answer. Scott Agness joins us from The Athletic here on the Four Winds Lakeside Inn and Marina Hotline, fresh out of a meeting in Vegas. Meeting, that's always an interesting term for
in fairness,
Vegas.
Casey, I'm having company meetings today.
Oh, wow.
I snuck out of The Athletic. Every one of our writers is in town, so kind of having a mini summit. It's really cool to have us all in one place.
That I guess that actually makes sense. I'll buy that. I don't know if you know the answer to this, but the Spurs first-round pick is from Croatia, and if I'm not mistaken, he's playing in the Summer League. So, did you know why, some international players are playing in the Summer League, and is there anything the Pacers could have done before drafting Goga to try to expedite this process?
So the difference there is, for one, if a guy played college basketball, he's already got a type of work visa that can then be transferred into the specialty visa. There's a 30-day period where they're free to continue on. Just like, for instance, if a current overseas guy, let's take Bojan Bogdanovic. When he was when he signed with the Pacers, he already had a work visa from being over here. And it was during the off season. He's not going to play summer league, and so you don't hear anything about it, right? Because it's 3 and 4 months later, and of course he already has it. But some of the other guys say that are in summer league. There's also a situation where if you're in the United States for I think it's 90 days, then that's enough to already have your work visa and continue on. So a lot of those guys, if maybe they had pre-draft camps in California and had been here for several months, that's one reason why they're already approved. And the Pacers have to go through this process. And I do want to point out, Pacers were on top of it. Their lawyer was actually in the draft room, Frank Polisi, prepared for this moment and immediately filed the next day after conversations with the NBA on how to handle it and how to potentially submit paperwork. Because another layer in this that's in my story is that they have to submit special paperwork, that involves details of the job, his salary. Well, the salary cap is not set till a few days before July 1st. So they had to address that with the NBA and realize what to put on that form. And so they basically said, we think it'll be substantially similar to what the 18th pick last year made. So there's just so many layers to this, and that's where I was really fascinated by the process, and I think fans can appreciate the things that they're going through.
Scott Agness joining us from The Athletic, and again, you can check out that story that he just referenced on the Pacers page on The Athletic. Scott, moving over, I guess, to things that you have observed on the court in Vegas, specifically with the Pacers, 2 games into it, probably an overall team result, a lot more bad than good. What are some of your takeaways, good and bad, I guess, from what you've seen the first 2 games?
Yeah, it's a lot of times, Kevin, it's hard to take a lot from these games, the makeup. I want to see those guys that are already on the roster. You're talking about Aaron Holiday, Alize Johnson, and ideally Edmund Sumner, although he's dealing with a soreness in his foot. You want to see something from them more than anything. And thus far, it's been underwhelming, I would say. But I also try to take in consideration that they're playing with a whole new cast of guys that they're not accustomed to. So I remember yesterday we saw a pass where Aaron Holiday darted it to Brian Bowen cutting through the lane. He wasn't watching. There just isn't that chemistry. I'd like to see Alize Johnson finish much better around the rim, and in general, Holiday take better care of the basketball. But thus far, the games have not been the entertaining part in everything.
I know the deal hasn't been finalized yet with T.J. McConnell, but could he be the backup this year? And Aaron Holiday maybe would be playing off the ball a little bit or be that third point guard. I don't want to put too much stock into 2 games from Aaron Holiday here in the Summer League, but
right.
I mean, T.J. McConnell was a rotational player for one of the better teams in the East last year.
It's a curious thought, right? Because one of the things this roster has shown us is there's a lot of interchangeable parts, right? Malcolm Brogdon's not a true point guard. He's going to play the point, and I think he'll do it great. But you could see a backcourt. What if you say of Aaron Holiday and Malcolm Brogdon, or Brogdon and Sumner, or like you mentioned, maybe it's T.J. McConnell and Victor ultimately. I think realistically going into this year, Holiday's penciled in as that backup point guard. That's who they want to see in that spot, and obviously you want your guy to grow and develop, and they're high on him. But at the same time, I don't think you're going to see T.J. McConnell get the minutes like a third-string point guard where you're seldomly used, very much like Aaron Holiday was last year. Because McConnell has a lot to play, and it also shows the Pacers' belief in him, giving him a multi-year deal, 2 years rather than just 1 to kind of float him along. That's what it suggests to me.
Is there any room, cap-wise, roster-wise, for maybe one more notable addition here this offseason?
Yeah, I think so. We don't know the exact numbers just yet because everything hadn't quite been finalized, like Sumner's re-signing and how that impacts the cap, because there's something called the room exception, which is just under $5 million that they could use for that, or they could use cap space. And it's kind of a complicated mess that a lot of fans are probably learning about this time of year every year. But I think there's enough there. I think what they really need to aggressively find is that small forward, because I'm not comfortable with where they are right now with who guards LeBron, who guards Giannis. Obviously, those guys that you just want to contain, but I'm not sure who you pencil in as that guy right now. I think it's T.J. Warren, but he's not a defender. He is a scorer. And Boyan and Thad Young last year were those primary defenders on those key, 6'8" wings, and I just don't see it on the Pacers roster right now.
Yeah, I'm glad you brought that up, Scott. Scott Agness joining us from The Athletic here on the Dan Dockett Show. Connor on Twitter earlier asked me that, and I do think that's one of the bigger questions I have for this team right now is, if you look at Malcolm Brogdon, he actually defended Kawhi extremely well compared to others in the playoffs this past year, but you don't want to throw that burden on Brogdon every night. Like, okay, yeah, go be our point guard for 82 nights out of the year and carry the scoring, that heavy water with Victor Oladipo out for X amount of games, and then also guard Giannis, guard Jimmy Butler, other wings in the Eastern Conference before you go play out West. To me, that is a bit of a missing piece right now is, okay, who gets that top defensive assignment night in and night out?
That's how I felt going into free agency. I thought Justin Holiday, who the Pacers had been looking into over the last couple of years, were intrigued by, and I know he's still a free agent, but I'm not sure how he would fit within this whole mix. Obviously wanting a greater role and more money in that whole thing. But I do like how they got bigger in general, right? Moving up from 6-foot point guards, now 6'5", and then they also were able to get younger, as a lot of people have obviously hit on, where the average age is 25 years old now, and you moved on from those 30, 31, 32-year-olds.
Yeah, definitely a clear focus achieved by Kevin Pritchard there. A couple more things, Scott, because I know you're pretty busy out there. We heard yesterday here in Indiana, the Domantas Sabonis contract extension up next, I guess, on the priority list of Kevin Pritchard. How do you think that could look compared to the extension we saw Miles Turner get last year, which I believe was 4 years, $72 million?
Yeah, not including potential bonuses. So, and it's a flat $18 million per year. The Pacers generally like to do those flat deals. For example, I think Jeremy Lamb's at 10.5, which is a great bargain annually for him. So Sabonis, getting him to an extension would make a lot of sense, because then his trade value would return more, right? Because you generally have to match what his salary would be, and now obviously it wouldn't kick in till next year, much like Miles Turner. But this is huge. I was talking with Thad Young about it last night. He was obviously in the middle of everything last year, now playing with the Bulls. But how are you going to make this work in terms of playing on the court? It was something with Domas at the 4 and Miles at the 5. They didn't really even practice last year. So this is something new that they're going to have to try and really explore, I think. Both are extremely talented in their own right, but the biggest challenge, and at least them on the court, will be the defense on the 4, on the power forward, because Domas at least hasn't shown to this point that he can do that, and Miles is too good to take away from the rim. But then in terms of the contract, I think Domas would want to get it done. I think the earlier you can get that money, the better, especially as you're going into that unknown role where maybe you don't look your best or maximize your abilities, at least in his mind. So I think it would be advantageous for both the Pacers and Sabonis to get something done. And there's no urgency, say this month. It can go up until the start of the season in October. And last year, of course, people remember with Miles, they finalized it in that final hour. Miles jumped in a SUV and raced to the practice center to get it done.
Yeah. Do remember that last year. Last one before we let you go, Scott. Victor Oladipo, of course, in the gym yesterday when you were there. What's next in terms of hurdles in his rehab? We heard, maybe it was in the Jack McMullen story on ESPN.com, or maybe Kevin Pritchard said this, but he's doing some light sprinting, not doing any cutting, a lot of shooting, a lot of form work with kind of his stroke, if you will. What is next in the rehab for Victor Oladipo?
Yeah, so for the one thing, these last several months, what he's really been focused on is shooting, and both of his shooting coaches have flown out here with him. They're going to work in the gym and also, be there with him. So they're saying he's as focused as ever. He's really shooting the ball incredibly well and locked in on his form because he's had that time where all he could really do is shoot. But at this point, he's running down the floor. He's purposely stopping rather quickly, and that's my biggest concern in this whole rehab. He is so dependent on the power that he drives from his legs, his quick bursts, and sudden stops, particularly at that three-point line where he'll sprint it up the floor, stop, gather, and shoot. And he hadn't quite gotten to that point just yet, but he is running. He's standing on a ball, working on holding down his positioning, say, on a block when defenders are applying pressure. So he's making steady progress, continue, they say, to be ahead of schedule. But for him, I think it's just being patient and slow and steady and everything, realizing you're 5 months into this process. That'll probably take over a year to really be satisfactory and back to his level, much like we saw with Paul George and Gordon Hayward in this past year.
And now it sounds like he'll get a little work in with Malcolm Brogdon as Brogdon comes
that is the plan.
Yeah, comes out to Vegas. So, Scott, 6:30 tonight on NBA TV for Pacers fans out there. Scott will be in the gym from Vegas. A must follow. His latest on The Athletic, besides the visa article, is on Edmund Sumner, a Q&A with Edmund, who got a contract extension earlier this week. So, Scott, appreciate it, man.